Welcome to the Talent Report Plus Thrive podcast, where we dive deep into the ever-evolving topic of talent with insights from MRA members. I'm your host, Jim Morgan, Vice President of Workforce Strategies at MRA, and I'm thrilled to guide you through these conversations with our MRA members who are industry experts, thought leaders, and passionate professionals at the forefront of talent development. Welcome to the July edition of the Talent Report. I'm Jim Morgan, Vice President of Workforce Strategies at MRA, and it's a pleasure to have you again. I'm pleased to be at the Potawatomi Casino in downtown Milwaukee, coming to you live today. Beautiful day off the lake. So with that, it is my pleasure to introduce to you Amy Jones from Didion. Amy is the Director of Human Resources and Learning Development there. She leads their people operations team, and I'm going to let her tell a little bit more about who all is included in people operations. Over 25 years of experience. And I'll be honest, so she doesn't, think this was just all flattery. I went out and found all of this stuff. It's not like she told me, "Oh, I'm good at all of these things." But I've had the opportunity to work with her and with Didion, and so I can give it the Better Business Bureau stamp of approval to say, I know she is actually very good at all these things because I've had the opportunity to work with her on all of these. And she's a certified facilitator of high performance work. I had the pleasure of meeting Amy for the first time when I was doing my Sansdemics presentation very often. Some of you have probably heard that, but it's really about demographics. Where are people moving to? Where are they coming from? And how bad is the shortage going to be? Really trying to look at the numbers of things and helping HR people and companies understand that this isn't just a temporary problem that we've got here in terms of finding employees. It's one that's going to stick with us for quite a while. We had the opportunity to talk afterwards, and then I had the opportunity to work with Didion and their folks and with Amy. So it was a real pleasure to do that. And as I said, all the things that it said on that previous slide, I know that Amy's capable of, and really looking forward to the conversation. So Amy, welcome. It's great to have you with us and looking forward to your story.
All right. Well, thank you, Jim. I'll jump right into what I have to talk about today. For those who are listening, I'm fighting a little summer cold, so thank you for bearing with me as I work through that. But I really am pleased to be here today to share some of Didion's story and some of our lessons learned as we have worked toward being a strategic partner at Didion. So one of the experts that I have watched and followed throughout my 25 plus years in HR is David Ulrich. And he has been around since the inception of the HR business partner model and well before. And as I've been following his work, and he really tailors it to what's going on in the world and business around us, one of the new things you're hearing him talk about is the move of HR to the human capabilities contribution level. And if you can focus on the top right-hand box in this model, where he mentions things like creating marketplace value outside and inside of your organization, and really focusing on organizing and leading within the HR discipline and within the company. So this has been a model that I have shared with our team and that we really don't want to lose sight of as we continue to evolve HR at Didion. And one of the key philosophies and how we approach HR at Didion lies with something we call table stakes. And what I mean by that is we believe that things like compliance, payroll, benefit administration, et cetera, it's expected that we execute those things flawlessly. And we have to do it in a must-do, can't-fail kind of way. We believe that if we don't do those things, that we haven't earned our seat at the table to really add strategic value in different ways. So one of our strategies we've used at Didion is we have chosen to outsource as much of those back office HR functions, the tactical things as possible, to free up the time of our people to spend on the more business impacting things that we feel we are better positioned to do. So to help us do that, we ground ourselves, our HD team, in these three words. We're constantly challenging ourselves. Where do we need to reinvent? We believe that every HR program, policy, process has a life cycle. And you need to be revisiting those things every couple years to make sure they're current and relevant. We also challenge ourselves to be relevant. So are we focused on the right things that are important to the business leaders? And we challenge ourselves to be indispensable. So we want to know what's keeping our business leaders up at night, and what are the big things we can help them work through to make their lives easier. Because really, we're here because they are here. We're here to help we're here to be easy to do business with and to help them be as effective as possible. One of the required readings on our team is a book called Making Yourself Indispensable by Mark Samuel. I'd highly recommend it. So I wanted to share with you a case study and some things that we've been going through. And really this started in 2000, I would say 21. And we were at a sort of a crossroads at Didion. We had just commissioned a new facility. Like everybody else, we were, struggling to get out of the pandemic, and we were experiencing some pain points. And these were the kinds of things we were hearing as an HD team when we went to our leaders and asked that question, what's keeping you up at night? They talked about an unstable and poorly trained workforce, more turnover than they'd like to see, higher vacancy rates. They called recruiting a black hole, which many of you may have heard or are hearing now. They were concerned about quality of hires and the predictability of the people who were showing up every day in new hire orientation. Some of them were unsure about what our hiring practices actually were and what their role was. And then they also were focused quite heavily on upskilling the new hires and the existing team members. So I want to share with you what our HD team did to react to that feedback that we were hearing. One of the things that really was the impetus in a lot of our changes was Jim's data that he presented in the SANS-DEMIC presentation. If you haven't seen that data yet, it's fascinating. And really the core issue that he's uncovered for us was that sometimes when you are getting feedback that it's a recruiting issue and why can't recruiting get it right, it really is a demographics issue. You really have to dig deeper. And so we went to our leaders with that data, and it really made them pause, and it made us dig in, especially in a town as small as Cambria, and talk about what could we do to change this dilemma that we were having about how to source talent. So we started out by making sure we had the right people in the right roles, especially in HD or HR, and in the leadership, especially the frontline positions who were touching most of the employees in our organization. Once we did some right sizing there, we really challenged ourselves to look at our KPIs and what were we measuring, because we really believe what gets measured gets done. And one of my favorite resources to consult in the HR space regarding KPIs is a book that John Sullivan wrote many years ago, and I'm sure I'm dating myself by quoting this book, but it's called HR Metrics, the World-Class Way. And for every discipline in HR, John lays out a lot of metrics, and some of them may be right for your organization, some of them may not be, but they really kind of turn metrics on its head and help us to think differently about what levers can we pull. For example, in the area of recruiting, instead of reporting on time to fill, we are reporting on presentation to offer, which is a great metric that reflects the hiring manager responsiveness and are we making decisions quickly and timely. We also focus on offer to start, because that is the metric that helps us understand, are we engaging those new hires after offer? And are we keeping them engaged and creating excitement in the new job that they're coming to within 1 to 2 weeks? One of the things we learned is that when cost of turnover is a top line metric, we were pretty good at controlling it and influencing it. As soon as we removed it and took our eyes onto something else, our metrics slipped back. So we learned that we really need to keep that as a top line metric. And another metric that we are focused on, especially right now, is training. And instead of looking at hours of training, we're looking at time to proficiency. So how long does it take that manufacturing employee on the floor to become really proficient at their job? We feel that's a better metric to track than hours of training. We also, I'm on number 4 now, created a hyper focus on turnover. And one of the things we did to really focus on it is we conducted an RCA, or root cause analysis, on every single person who left our organization, whether they were considered positive turnover or not. And that starts with the fundamental philosophy that we can learn something from every single person that leaves this organization. We challenge our leaders to take it personally when someone leaves Didion. And we ask ourselves things like, is it the hiring process? Is it our decision-making process? Is it our onboarding process, training? What could we do to have prevented that turnover? Then we create a list of action items and we make sure that we log those in an action item register. We track them and we make sure that we do something about all those issues. The top 2 categories that we identified were hiring selection processes and frontline leadership. So we got busy very quickly in focusing on those things and making them better. Next, we conducted stay interviews with our top performers and people in key positions. We learned a lot of really valuable insight from the folks in those groups. And again, we created action item registers and made sure we were progressing in all of those areas. We had a heavy focus on creating role standards and training matrices for every single role in the company. We implemented our first LMS, and we, again, became hyper-focused on this area, making sure that people understood what it is they're responsible for and how they can, what they need to do to be successful in their jobs. Number 7, we worked with Jim's consultation, actually, to help improve our early in career talent program. Number 8, we implemented new hire check-ins. So we religiously do check-ins 30, 90, and 180 days with new hires. We track that data, we report it out to leaders in the organization, and we use it as this constant feedback mechanism for what we can do to make the new hire process better. And lastly, we had a lot of campaigns, and they're really forever ongoing, about building internal pride in the company within Didion. Our internal Marcom team is an extension of our HD team. So we have regular biweekly meetings with them. We are their top internal customer, and we just would not be successful without their help. So if any of you have those resources in your company, I would highly recommend that you fully utilize them and embrace them and make them be part of your team. So the next slide, and this is one of my last slides, is really the most exciting thing I have to share with you, I think. So these were the results of all of this work that really went on over about a 2-year time frame. So we were able to produce some pretty astounding business results. The first was we moved company turnover from 49% to 25%. We created stabilization in our frontline leadership team. So we were experiencing turnover at that level, and that went down significantly. We increased the quality of hire to about a 4.1+% on a 5-point scale that we measure monthly. We increased our employee referrals so that 30% of the positions we fill are filled with employee referral candidates. And our new hires tell us in these check-ins that we're doing with them, 95% of them tell us they are either extremely happy or happy with their decision to join Didion. So you can see all these things that we were doing. Really, the flywheel starts spinning. And the numbers that I'm not showing you are things like the plant OEE numbers increased, our customer satisfaction score increased, and the plant performance is up across all of our facilities. Now, I understand this is not easy work. This is sometimes like turning the Titanic, and it's easy to get overwhelmed when you look at the enormity of what's in front of you. One piece of advice I'd have for anyone in HR on this call who's leading a team of HR professionals, you have to look at this as you're eating the elephant a bite at a time. You try not to get overwhelmed and try to focus on where can I move the needle today, this week, this month, and track those metrics and be reporting out on them. and keep them front of mind in your business leader's mind so that really there's focus all across the organization on the important people metrics. That's all I have to present to you. And I noticed there's quite a few questions coming in. So how would you like to handle those, Jim?
Well, I'm going back to your slide with the 9 points because I think there's a couple of things in there, but somebody asked if, does Didion use EOS as your strategic planning process?
We do.
And how did that, I'm sure there was something behind that question, knowing what it is and what Miranda might have been looking for, but how did that fit in with what you were doing with this work?
That's a good question. So we started using the EOS model about 4 or 5 years ago, and it really put some rigor behind cascading goals and identifying company goals. For us, it was by quarter, and then every 3 years and 5-year goal periods, and making sure that every person in the organization was connected to those goals. So that was one of the, I would say, biggest impacts that EOS had on how we do strategic planning.
And then you went through pretty quickly, but your right seats, right people, right seats, right bus, right role, the whole shooting match. You kind of glanced over that one pretty quick, and I'm guessing that was not an easy task. How did you go about, I guess, the evaluation of those people, trying to get agreement on who may or may not have either been in the right role or, on the right bus? And then how'd you go about making some of those changes happen?
Yeah, that's a good question. So for us, we approached it from a continuous improvement perspective. And really that started with creating or identifying standard work and standard role expectations for every role. So being very clear about what the organization needs out of literally every role in the company. And then working with each individual in that role to figure out, is this the job they want to have? And is this how they want to work? And in some cases, it was having hard conversations because these may not have been the jobs people signed up for when they joined the company or took the role on. We also implemented a couple of really good assessment tools for a couple levels in the organization. And they were both for personal development as well as helping us figure out where people in the right seats.
And then had another one on your new member check-ins. When do you start that? How frequently do you do it? Maybe what's involved with that?
Sure. So it's a very standard process for us. We have a set of questions. We ask the same questions of every single person that we check in with, and we do them at 30 days, 90 days, and 180 days of employment. And the questions change over time. So the questions at 30 days are very straightforward. Do you have what you need to do your job? Do you know who your team is? Have you met with your leader? Along the way, we're also always asking team members if they feel safe or if there are any safety issues we could help them address. And then we have some really great reporting mechanisms through SharePoint that we report those results out to the organization.
What do you use someone for your employee engagement surveys or for your new check-in ones? Did you come up with that on your own, or how do you facilitate those?
Yes, so our team came up with those questions on their own, and then our team facilitates those check-ins.
And do they do them in person, or is it a form fill out?
Yes, great question. Ideally, they're in person. Sometimes they're over Teams or phone. We're a 24/7 operation, so we can't always reach people in person and on site. But we do the best we can to make them on site wherever possible.
And you don't have to disclose anything you don't want to, but do you utilize your HRIS in a lot of this? Are you doing this like separate from your human resources platform, or how do those two interconnect?
We're doing a lot of workflow automation, I would say, through a tool called SharePoint and Smartsheets we heavily use. So I just happen to be blessed to have a couple of really talented people on our team who love automation and they love automating HR processes. And that's the tool that we've gravitated towards, and it's been easiest for us to implement.
I think we have quite a few companies using EOS as their strategic planning model because there's a lot of questions around that. Since that process seems to be pretty numbers driven, how did you incorporate the people and culture part with the company in terms of, you're in the human business, And certainly there's measures with that, but how did you incorporate that into the EOS process?
So one of the things that I did as the HD leader at Didion is I really was an advocate for making sure that people metrics were a top line metric. And I discovered for a while they were on the scorecard, but they weren't being discussed. So I brought that, I brought that issue to the attention of the executive team. If they're on the scorecard, they really need to be something we're talking about every single week, every single month. And when we lose focus on them, we definitely learned that that's when we fell backwards. So one thing about the Didion culture is that when we decide we're going to do something, we do it. So it's important to keep people at the top of that list if you're going to keep the people side of your business moving forward.
Are there any assessments that you used to sort of help you with the right leaders in the right positions? Was it just a human assessment of it, or how did you figure out who was in the wrong seat?
One of the assessments that we are really liking right now is a tool called Caliper. And I think it's recently been renamed Talogy. And we use that assessment primarily with our leadership roles and our salary or exempt level roles in the company. And there's both a development version of it as well as a hiring version of it. And it's been a very strong predictor of success. So we use that tool heavily, both to give people feedback and help them develop as well as to hire.
Okay. I know just because I was kind of along for your ride, you sort of used the data that you talked about at the beginning, and I had the opportunity to come talk to your leadership team. As we talk about HR getting to the table and your steps of things you did here, how did you sell all this to leadership? You just got done saying, well, we made sure we had these people numbers, but nobody was paying any attention to them. So I made sure we did. Were there a couple of key things that you did that you said, this is what got people's attention?
I think it really was listening to the pain points in the organization. So I don't think you can go to a company with, we should do something just because it feels good, or maybe it's the right thing to do. We all know it's the right thing to do. I think you really have to tie it to business results, whether it be sales, customer service, production, whatever the top metrics are for your organization. You really need to tie the people side to the business results. Then it really isn't a question if we're going to focus on the people side. You have to focus on the people side.
We had one more question come in. How are you measuring time to proficiency among your new hires?
So time to proficiency is really, in our world, it's have you completed all of the training required to do your job, and have you been validated that you are proficient in all of those things that you need to be trained in. So if you've been trained, your leader has validated that you're competent, you're applying those learnings, then you are proficient in your job and you're ready, to go to work and do the job that you were hired to do. So our goal is to continually drive that time frame down so that the time frame to be effective is shorter than it is today.
Well, that was fantastic. The number of questions coming in just sort of proves that you're hitting a couple of buttons here that people are very interested in. Any closing words of wisdom that you'd say, that not that you're done with your journey, but you've sure taken some big steps in it, that you would recommend to people?
Well, Jim, one of the things that getting ready for today has helped me to realize is that we have achieved a lot over the last several years. And it's easy to get caught up in the day-to-day and turning the Titanic. Don't forget to pause and celebrate with your team all the things that you have accomplished. And I'm sure all of you have things, that would be equally as impressive as the things I've shared with you today. And just don't forget that you are making progress. Sometimes it doesn't feel like it, but there are a lot of people, such as the people on this call, who you can talk to, bounce ideas off of. And certainly, Jim, you have been, a big help for me, as well as others at MRA, in really helping me understand how I can move the business forward. And I appreciate having those sounding boards outside of my company.
Well, that's very nice of you and completely unsolicited, but we may just tape that and use it. So you may be our new spokesperson, I think, along the way. Amy, I really appreciate you sort of fighting through the illness here and being a part of this with us. I'm guessing there's going to be lots more questions, and as we get them, we'll pass them on to you. But the way that you walked through it, it's obvious that there's a lot of people who, by signs of confetti and clapping hands here, got a lot out of it. So really appreciate the way that you put it together. And I think your advice that every once in a while we got to take 10% of our time and actually tell our story so that people know that, hey, something's actually happened here, that that's a worthwhile investment. Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Talent Report Plus Thrive podcast. Stay connected for more exclusive insights directly from our MRA members. Check out the show notes for valuable resources on today's topics. If you have questions or want to learn more about MRA, find my contact information in the show notes or check out www.mranet.org.